All right, guys. This is Motor Racing Podcast. Don, how are you doing today, bud?
Hey, good evening, Kevin. Looking forward to having some banter back and forth over our sports we love.
Yes, sir. Um, so it's Wednesday. Um, we had a lot to talk about last night and continue conversation. There's a lot to talk about, especially going into this weekend, being Talladega. Um, Keeping with Chase Elliott, coming from that conversation, getting the win at Texas. Does that momentum give him any sort of advantage going into Talladega?
Look, with Chase Elliott, he's a NASCAR champion, right? Son of Bill Elliott, the kid, incredibly talented. Credit where it's due. He's gone through some weird struggles here recently. Now, whether we credit that to his injury or any kind of mental block he may have had going there for 40 plus races, not being able to get a win for his team and his owner. Uh, Now that that's out of the way and he can kind of take a deep breath and they've got their playoff spot set, you kind of enter these races with a different mindset, especially when you got that win under your belt. I would fully expect Chase Elliott and his crew chief, I believe it's Alan Gustafson, uh,
Yes.
to just have a ball the rest of the season. They've got leg room to do what they want to do. They can take bigger chances at any point at any time now. I fully expect the 9 team to be a factor to, especially here coming up to Talladega, where he's shown a lot of strength before. So absolutely, look out for that 9 car because now the weight's off the shoulders.
Now, with the 9 car being mentioned, and keeping Hendrick Motorsports in the conversation, the 48 team, we talked about them not really having a lot of speed. He's had a couple good finishes, being Alex Bowman having a couple good finishes this season, but they've just not had the momentum. Um, with as successful as Hendrick Motorsports is has been this season. With a track like Talladega, does Hendrick Motorsports put all their eggs in Alex Bowman's basket for this weekend? Uh,
Why not?
that,
Why not? Because you already got your 3 guys in the playoffs. Let's get that 48 team going. Let's figure out what's going on, whether it be the crew chief, whether it be team members in the shop, whether it be Alex behind the wheel. Let's figure out what's going on. Let's get that 48 team in the playoffs, and let's do it quick.
um, you know, having a track like Talladega. So this is, I believe, race number 10 during the season. Is it correct?
Yeah, we're on number 10.
Okay, so we've had this will make Super Speedway number 3.
Correct. Daytona,
Um,
Talladega. Yep.
so the Daytona 500 is never going to be officially, moved. That's always going to be where it's at, unless they do something else, another reconfiguration with Atlanta. We have a super speedway there. How do you feel about having so many super speedway races so early in the season?
I think there are their goods and their bads. One, you typically, a lot of these teams go into Talladega and now Atlanta and Daytona expecting to probably lose a race car. That's just kind of how it goes at these events. If you make it out of there, you're kind of sigh of relief, right? And then if you win, it's an even bigger success. So I think for a lot of these teams, getting out of these super speedways with a clean race car is really important. And having 3 of those races out of the way early in the season probably helps a lot of teams too, as far as any kind of financial struggles the smaller teams might be dealing with. So having 3 of them this quick, getting a real good idea of where the car is at and what they can do with the tire will really help Goodyear and NASCAR figure out when these tracks come back around in the schedule. They'll have a much better game plan set in motion as we get into the meat of the season and into the playoffs.
So, you know, going back to Texas, between Texas and Talladega, okay, so we just had a string of short tracks. We get a mile and a half, and then we go back to a super speedway, and then we're going to go back to a mile and a half. How do you think the drivers need to prepare, or does it change anything going to, the jump around? They had the mindset, they were at a short track for a couple weeks. we got a mile and a half, and then we go to super speedway racing where that's just completely different.
Right.
And then back to mile and a half. How do these drivers, how do they cope with that? How does their mindset affect the next 3 weeks?
That's a really good question, and something that they don't really talk about on a lot of the bigger channels, I think, is driver mentality. You go through this gauntlet of a season. Now you have your tracks you love, your tracks you don't like as much. You got your fans that have the tracks they love and the ones they don't like as much. And I think the way these guys are able to prepare, whether it be simulations, offsite testing, they've got so many tools to their advantage, and they're all professionals. They know how to go into each race with the correct mindset. They've got the right people around them to make sure every T is crossed and every I is dotted. So I don't think it's going to be a struggle for a lot of them. I think the big struggle is once you get on track and dealing with the traffic. I think that's where a lot of drivers will actually get into some trouble. But as far as mentally preparing and going from short tracks to intermediate tracks and then all the way up to your super speedways, these guys are the best. They know what they're doing. They're ready to go.
The number 5 suspension, with there being a suspension there, I know we talked about Alex Bowman and Hendrick turning all their heads and all their sights set on Alex Bowman. Kyle Larson has got 2 wins on the season now.
I believe he's at 2, right?
Okay, so with the suspension of Kyle Larson, does that hinder Alex Bowman at all, or does Alex Bowman hinder with the suspension of Kyle Larson? Does it affect any of the Hendrick Motorsports teams at all?
I think you have to have the mentality of next man up, and I'm speaking for Kyle Larson's team. These guys know what to expect of each other. Everybody knows their habits. Everybody knows their quirks. It's next man up mentality. Whoever's going to take over in those positions will be prepared and ready to go. As far as Alex Bowman goes, it's really going to be a matter of time telling if they're going to come around or not. And like you said, he's had a couple good finishes, so if they can continue to build on that, and now with Hendrick able to focus primarily on the 48 team, I'd expect them to be making some noise here pretty quick.
And then let's go ahead and break down this Texas race, man, because from the drop of the green flag to the drop of the checkered, it was crazy. Right. Between the lead changes, I really didn't hear many of the drivers complaining about not being able to pass. There was some complaints, but for the most part, I think NASCAR got the aero package part of it right.
Right.
Produced some really good racing. The tire compound that they brought, the aero package, Chevrolet being as dominant as they were this weekend through all 3 series.
Yep.
I know we talked about last week's show, it was going to be between Chevy and Toyota this weekend.
And that's what it was.
For the Xfinity series, Toyota ran up front for a little bit, and then you had Chevrolet and Ryan Sieg there almost taking the win for Ford and getting Ford's first win of the season.
Right.
In essence, how do we break down this race? How does NASCAR take the element of Texas and the success they had and apply it to the rest of the season?
Listen, Texas was a really exciting race. If you actually break down the 3 stages of the Cup race at Texas, the first stage, it really seemed like everybody wanted to fill it out. Nobody really wanted to get too wild on the passing and get people swirled up like you were talking about with the aero packages. The second stage, after they got the first stage and everybody put a little bit of rubber down, that's when you started seeing people move around and like, okay, my car kind of likes it up here. Okay, my car is pretty quick down here. And then the third stage, boy, these guys had at it. It was so much fun to see the lines being raced, seeing people chase each other down the back straightaway, seeing people side drafting, which you don't see much out of the next gen car coming out of turn 4, heading to the start finish line. It was poetry in motion for me. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better layout of a race. Now, of course, you had your overtimes and people got crazy, but you know what? That's racing. People are going for the win. You never know when your first one is going to be if you ever get it. You never know when your last one's going to be if you ever get it. So, just go get it, man. It was a blast. They did a great job this week. I'm really proud of the show NASCAR put on.
And not just NASCAR, man, the drivers.
The drivers, absolutely.
Yes, drivers who, I'm sure. What was the weather like in Texas, Don?
It was perfect, man. We were mid 80s. It was sunshine. There was some little bit of clouds in the AM just to kind of keep it a little humid. But man, once the clouds broke, it was a beautiful, beautiful weekend.
So I'm sure the drivers weren't cooking in those cars, but it was pretty warm.
It was warm. Yeah, we'll give them the warm.
Yeah, cahoots out to those drivers, man, for putting on the show week in and week out for these fans and putting their heart. We can tell it out on the racetrack when we watch these races that these drivers are putting everything they've got into trying winning these cup races. And not just cup, I mean, throughout all three series.
Absolutely.
And this weekend so far, Texas didn't disappoint. COTA didn't disappoint. Atlanta hasn't disappointed. I don't think we've had a disappointing race yet this season. I think, from the end of last season to the beginning of this season until now, I think NASCAR's fixed something.
Right.
Because from the end of last season, if you start at the start of the playoffs, the last 10 races, and then you take the first 10 races of this season, the racing has been completely different. Right. I mean, a complete 180. So what do we expect? Because within the next couple of weeks, we have Talladega this weekend at Super Speedway. We have Kansas the following weekend, correct?
Right.
We have Darlington coming up. We have the Coca-Cola 600 coming up. So we have a bunch of 1.5 miles. I know we have Sonoma after Charlotte.
That's going to be an interesting one because of their repave and all the drama with that.
Yes, especially the drama between Denny Hamlin and Marcus Smith online.
Correct.
While we're on the point of Denny Hamlin, when you were there at the race, you said that more of the boos were in Denny's environment.
I haven't experienced a lot of NASCAR races. I'm on my 5th one, and I'm planning on going to a bunch more. My first race, it seemed like Kyle Busch drew more of the boos from fans. It was Rowdy. Rowdy's got them haters, right? And as it's progressed from 2021 to 2024, I was blown away by the response. One at driver intros and the amount of people booing Denny Hamlin, and then I've never heard anything. I've been to Spurs games that have gotten crazy. I've been to some crazy sporting events, but when Denny Hamlin got loose, he hadn't even hit the wall yet, and that crowd could see his car getting sideways, and they just started blowing up cheering. Hats off to Denny for playing the villain role to absolute perfection. He is eating up every single bit of it. I think it's beautiful for the sport. I think it's great that we have somebody we love to dislike, and I'm not speaking for me, but I'm speaking for fans in general. And then shout out to his fans for sticking with him through all the ups and downs. They still 20 years into this thing, they still don't have a championship to celebrate. So Denny's doing it right. He's the owner of my favorite team, 23XI. So I got some of that love-hate stuff for Denny Hamlin, but he's doing it right, man. It's really good for the sport, especially in 2024.
And man, for all you Denny Hamlin fans out there, this is Kevin speaking. Coming from a Kyle Busch fan, we get the shit that you guys get on a weekly basis at the racetrack. Okay, we're with you there, so don't think we ain't. Denny Hamlin taking the role over. Kyle Busch has been the villain of NASCAR for going on almost 16, 17 years now?
I would say ever since the driver change or driver switch in 2008 and then them spinning each other out, I think that really kicked off the Kyle Busch.
So going 16 years now.
16 years now. I wouldn't count the RCR year too much. It really didn't seem like Kyle, excuse me for the horn honking in the background, guys. It doesn't seem like Kyle had many haters last season from the 2 races I experienced. it really seemed like everybody had kind of chilled out. And I don't know if that's a Chevy thing or a Toyota thing, because I know.
See, that was my thing. I've seen a lot of stuff on social media, Facebook and Twitter mostly. A lot of these fans, and I don't want to call him bandwagon fans, but that's kind of what they're referred to, because they booed and hated Kyle while he was driving for Toyota, and the minute he switches manufacturers, all right, let's go Kyle Busch.
Right.
That's not a fan. I mean, and you had all those people, so to me,
it's a strange thing with NASCAR fans, how they can love one logo so much till the very end and dislike another logo to the even further. So it's an interesting thing with us fans.
I actually saw, talking about Kyle Busch, the switch from Toyota to Chevrolet. We'll talk about a silly season for a minute. We stayed at Stewart-Haas is selling 2 charters.
Right.
And it's possible that 23XI may be going to a 3-car team. Who knows, maybe possibly a 4-car team.
Right.
I don't know if I see them fully expanding to a full 4-car team yet. But Kyle Busch's his role at RCR, it's all gotten better. But as far as this season, RCR, even as a whole, has had nothing but trouble. And Kyle's his contract is up at the end of the season. So if 23XI does buy a charter, I know, it could be a possibility, and it would be a big move for Kyle to go back from Chevrolet back to Toyota to race for 23XI.
Right.
I'd love to see it. I saw some fan art the other day about him possibly going to 23XI, coming back, and letting 23XI, letting Kyle drive the 18 again.
Nice.
And I don't know what sponsorship would be. I'm sure they'd have to line something up, because a lot of the sponsors he's got at RCR were Tyler Reddick sponsors before.
Right.
Unless you count Rebel and Zone, and that Morgan and Morgan, but either way. And then who is it? Talk about Team Penske. They haven't won any races this year yet. Logano, nothing but problems for Logano. We normally don't see Fords in such a slump, but not just Ford, Team Penske as a whole. Ryan Blaney, he's not been too bad this season. No, he hasn't rattled off any wins yet, but is sitting top 5 in championship points.
I think if I'm not mistaken. I think he's
was he 7th on the update?
I think he's 7th, but don't quote me on that.
Okay, hold on, because I can tell you right here. Yes, 7th in the standings.
Correct.
That
lone blue oval.
And then Logano is 15th in points. It's insane to see that how the Fords were just completely dominant last season. And then to have problems, and Team Penske, Austin Cindric hasn't been he's been off the pace a little bit this season. These last couple races, especially at Texas, fast qualifying time. I don't remember where he finished. Is he even standing in the points?
He's 21st in points right now, out of the playoff picture, and it's been a pretty abysmal season for Austin. But it's his 3rd year in. He took over that 2 car for Brad Keselowski when Brad left. He won his Daytona 500 debut there 2022.
I was there to see that.
What an incredible finish that was.
Yes, it was.
But he hasn't been heard of since then. So credit it to a driver talent level issue. We know he's got talent. We know he's capable of winning at a high level. Why he isn't able to do it in some of the top equipment is a pretty interesting mystery. I actually spoke to one of the Ford representatives there at Texas Motor Speedway, and forgive me for not remembering his name, But he mentioned, I asked him, I go, what do y'all think is going on with the Fords this year? And he looked at me, kind of looked me up and down. He was like, "Who are you with?" And I actually said, "Motor Racing Podcast." I'm here just taking in the sights and just curious, what's going on with Fords this year. And he was like, "That's a good question." He's like, "If you look back at last season, we didn't have the greatest regular season. It wasn't terrible like it's shaping up to be so far this year, but we end up getting hot at the right time, headed into the playoffs, and end up rattling off the championship." And then he looked at me and he smiled and he goes, "Who won the championship in 2022?" And I was like, "Joey Logano in that blue oval." And he was like, "That's right." He was like, "In this day and age, it's not about being hot all year. It's about being hot at the right time. And if Ford manages to get a couple wins at the right time at the end of the season, they're just as likely to get into the championship four as anybody else."
I mean, the last 10 races of the season are the most important.
Correct.
So who knows? I mean, but they have to be able to run well in order to get into the playoffs. Right now, if they were to go anywhere right now, I think the only blue oval that's going to make it it's going to be
There's three.
Chris Buescher, Ryan Blaney, Chris Buescher, and Joey Logano. Kyle Busch rounding out the top 16 with Brad Keselowski, another Ford from the outside looking in.
Yes.
And then the next Ford behind him is Austin Cindric in 21st.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't think we expect anything out of Ford until we hit. I expect Ford to show up at Michigan.
Okay. We've been really strong at Michigan.
Yeah, just because of that's a Ford racetrack. Ford has won, I think, the last 4 Michigan races.
They're 4 straight. Okay.
I mean, who knows? And then who knows? It's the Fords always seem to be strong at the super speedways as well. So we could see that at Talladega this weekend.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if Ford actually breaks through this weekend. If I actually had to pick a weekend to see Ford finally break through and get that first win of the season, I would not be surprised if it was Talladega.
To be completely honest, we're not doing predictions right now. But if I had to pick the winner already this weekend, and it doesn't matter what your speed is running in qualifying or in practice or this or that, because you're going to make adjustments on it through the race, and it just matters if you're there at the end.
Right.
You could have the best car running at the front and you get turned and your day's done.
Right.
It's got to be right place, right time. I'd say I'm going to go out on a limb and say Penske. I'm not sure who, but Penske or Wood Brothers gets it done at Talladega this weekend. I think Ford gets their first win.
I don't think I can give any credit to Wood Brothers and that 21 car, Harrison Burton, yet. He seems to find himself in the worst positions at the worst time. I've never seen a driver struggle as much as he has.
Especially super speedways.
Right. So Harrison just always seems to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So absolutely, I would not be surprised to see a 212 or 22 up there in the top 5 at the end. Also, look out for RFK, because Brad and Chris Buescher, them boys are coming, and they're coming fast. So I would not be surprised to see those two probably make the top 10 here this weekend.
Who won? I believe Blaney won Talladega in the fall, didn't he?
That is correct. He has 3 out of the last, I think, 6 Talladega wins.
So I mean, it wouldn't be an issue to say that Blaney brings maybe the same car or the same setup. But like I said, it doesn't matter if you have the best car out there. It's just right place, right time.
Correct. And I wouldn't expect the same cars as they switched to the Dark Horse Mustang. So it's going to be a new car, new deal that they bring, but I would expect the same setup.
The same setup, at least unload, because with practice and qualifying, you can always do the small little twerks and make it better. And then you have the entire race as far as that to work on it.
Absolutely.
The Xfinity Series, man.
RCR. Jesse Love's going to probably take this one. I wouldn't be surprised.
I would say I would honestly wouldn't be surprised. I would love to see Jesse Love take it and get his first win, because the kid has got talent. He brings just another element to the racetrack. For a kid who didn't really get a lot of track time with the truck series, I believe he jumped from over the truck series, came straight from ARCA over to the Xfinity series.
Yep.
And to show the kind of control and speed that he's got in that race car, that kid's got a lot of talent.
Listen, the maturity that kid shows. I mean, he does. I mean, he has the media eaten out of the palm of his hand right now.
Oh, yeah.
They love interviewing that kid. He's got a lot of fans. His cheers are loud when we're at the racetrack. Clear as day talent. It's just a matter of time before he rattles off a couple, and expect both Austin Hill and Jesse Love to make deep runs in the playoff this year.
Oh, for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Austin Hill. He's, as far as the Xfinity series go, he's the new super speedway king.
Oh yeah.
Something about Austin Hill, man. I don't know what it is. Even our Richard Childress, he said something about Austin that he said he hadn't seen a long time since Dale.
Right.
He said Austin's just got something about his driving style that fits a super speedway, and he said he hasn't seen that kind of deal since Dale. And to me, that would be a compliment.
Oh yeah.
Like if you're, I'm already driving for Richard Childress. That's already a dream come true already.
Right.
But to tell me that, hey, I haven't seen that kind of stuff from anybody since I looked Dale in the eye, that would be not just a confidence booster, but I would say, driving a NASCAR, whether these drivers want to admit it or not, everybody has an ego.
Right.
And I think me as myself as a driver, that would boost an ego if it wasn't already big enough.
I think if you do anything at the highest level, you have to have some sort of ego. Whether that ego lines up with people's opinions or not is not a you problem. You do you, right? So I think you have to have a certain level of ego, a certain level of confidence to not only be successful in this sport, but win at this sport, because winning and being successful can be two different things. And it's not easy to get wins. And the fact that Austin is able to do it consistently and a lot of times leaving people like borderline speechless watching Austin race sometimes. So yeah, it's not a surprise that Richard sees some of that Dale in him, because I see it too. He's got that grit. He's got that focus, that determination that a lot of drivers might not have. And, it's going to be really interesting to see if he ends up landing one of our CR's cup rides here coming up soon.
I mean, who knows, if Kyle doesn't sign another deal and leaves, that leaves a cup ride open for somebody.
Look out for Austin Hill.
Yeah. It is what it is. Excuse me. And then the truck series, man, Corey Heim.
It's man, time, baby.
What a kid, man. What a driver. I don't think I've seen a kid in the last probably 10 years I've been watching the truck series. I don't think I've seen anybody come in and do what he's done in the truck series. Coming in as a rookie, as a part-time driver for Kyle Busch. And Kyle Busch doesn't sign anybody just to sign anybody to make sure he's got a truck full.
Right.
If you can't drive, you don't drive for Kyle Busch Motorsports.
Right.
So Corey rattled off 3 wins in his first year as a part-time driver with Kyle Busch Motorsports. Unfortunately, Kyle sells KBM, so Corey has nowhere to go. And then that 11 team picks up. And I wouldn't expect anything less for Corey Heim to be in the championship for, if not winning, hoisting the championship at the end of the year.
Right now, he has to be the favorite. If you're paying attention to the truck series, if you're paying attention to what them boys are doing out there on Fridays and Saturdays, Corey Heim is at the top of your list. And for those listening, I'm pointing at my wrist right now. That's what Corey Heim has been doing. It's Heim time, and he's not messing around, and he's coming fast. So yeah, definitely look forward to seeing him in the championship for this year.
And the other guy that I think is up there with Corey Heim right now, and it's not even another Toyota. It's Nick Sanchez in that 2 truck.
Yep.
Consistent speed. And another Chevrolet, Christian Eckes. Man, what a beast.
Yep.
Bristol, the battle he had with Kyle Busch at Bristol.
Yep.
That was awesome. And that just shows a lot about that kid too. He's beat Kyle Busch twice. I mean, how if you're Christian Eckes, how do you feel? You just beat one of the best in the business, and you've beat him twice in the same season in a truck series and a 1-2 finish. I mean, if you're Christian Eckes, what does that do to your mentality and your just taking that in?
If I'm Christian Eckes, I'm riding high on like you were mentioning earlier, your ego just gets boosted, and it's a natural thing. Some people can't help it. If I'm going toe to toe with one of the best in the business, and this is what's happening, these are the results, I'm winning against this guy. Yeah, my confidence is through the roof. It'll be interesting to see how he handles the confidence now that he's accomplishing these things, right? Because there are different levels to this being successful thing. So it'll be interesting to see how he rides the high, because it's okay to ride high. It's okay to ride that wave. How is he going to respond when he's not riding so high and he's starting to get beat by an inch or a foot or stuff like that? Does the season unravel, or does he handle it and keep moving forward? If I'm beating people like Kyle Busch, man, my ego is just, man, my chest is pumped up and I'm ready to go each and every weekend.
And man, we got to mention Matt Crafton. We haven't mentioned him really a whole lot, and I don't think the TV has either. Matt Crafton really hasn't had anything for anybody this season. Matt, he's a 4-time truck champion. But he's getting up there in age. Do we see Matt Crafton retiring anytime soon?
Matt, that's a really interesting question too. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets to the point where he's ready to start talking about hanging it up or maybe switching to a part-time ride. But like you mentioned, he's a veteran, and those veterans know better than anybody. These seasons are marathons, man. So kind of just picking and choosing your battles each week and make sure you put yourself in the best possible situation.
Well,
Would not be surprised to see him make a late run here as the season gets really into the meat of it. And never count out Matt Crafton. Like you said, he's a 4-time champion. The guy knows how to win. He knows how to win big. So I wouldn't count him out just yet. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing rumors of part-time or retirement here coming up.
And to point out, the last time he had a season like this, and I know we're only 10 races in, but a season length, just kind of crappy season that he's having now, he went winless all the way to Miami at the end of the season and won the championship. The only race he won that year was the championship. It was this kind. So don't count out Matt Crafton.
Absolutely. It's a great point.
Ty Majeski would be another one of those guys that I would probably find in the championship for. He's been so close to a couple wins this year. Man, and Ben Rhodes, he's in a slump right now too.
Yeah.
I think everybody over at Thor Sport, besides Ty Majeski, I think everybody over there's in a slump.
Right.
Shooting back over to the Xfinity Series, Shane Van Gisbergen, 1 or 2 good finishes so far this season, but we really haven't talked a lot about him, and neither has the broadcasters. He's really not come into the series and run up front and run like we thought he would. Is he still trying to get used to the car? Is it, why aren't we seeing Shane up front winning races yet?
Listen, with Shane is an interesting character. That guy has come into this sport. He's turning heads. He's really great with the fans and the kids. He is having a blast. I've seen this guy get out of 2 race cars live in person, and he gets out smiling every time. He is having so much fun beating and banging with these guys. He's been running up front. He's able to get that race car up front, that Chevrolet he's running. Maybe experience, lack of seat time and track time at these specific events is what's causing the late race struggles at some points. But do not be surprised to see this guy in victory lane this year in Xfinity, because he's quick, he's confident, and he's having fun. He's not even frustrated when he gets out of the race car. So that's a recipe for success, if you ask me.
Does his first win of the season come at a road course?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. He when I was watching him live in Coda, to see the way he manipulates these turns and manipulates drivers into doing what he wants them to do when they're in front of him, it's so cool to see. And if you're not paying attention to Shane, you need to start paying attention to him.
And I mean, it's possible. I'd like to see him rattle one off here at Sonoma.
Absolutely.
I honestly wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me if his first win didn't wait until Chicago.
To see him go back to back at Chicago. Let's talk about all of Trackhouse real quick. I know Shane's in Xfinity full time right now. Ross Chastain's first career win, road course. Daniel Suarez, first career win, road course. Shane Van Gisbergen, first career win, road course. So yeah, why break the trend? Let's go right back at it. Let's give him the best road course car they can give him, and watch him go take it from him.
And all the problems that all the Haley Deegan, last season she got that part-time ride, and this season, man, she's not doing too hot. Her first Xfinity debut last year, she finished within the either top 10 or top 15. It was either one, but she really hasn't. I think she may have wrecked almost every race car so far this year. And that's not me being rude, but I think she's had a wrecked race car almost every race this year.
Right. And with Haley, it's a really interesting thing because the girl can drive a race car, clearly. Like, she's not capable of racing. I don't believe her talent level is that of her peers. I think she gets pushed around a lot. I think she's not learning some of the lessons that she could learn in race scenarios and take it to the next race and use it to her advantage. It seems to be the same type stuff that she's getting into. It also boils down to qualifying. You got to qualify well, or you're going to end up back in the back of the pack, where you end up a part of somebody else's wreck, and it's not necessarily always your fault, but you put yourself there. So I think with Haley, time will tell as far as her success and if she's able to get something going with that team. But as of right now in that 15 car, I don't really see much happening with her. Do we think the jump to Xfinity was too quick from Truck Series? Was her performance in Truck Series even well enough to be deserving of an Xfinity ride? Or do we think NASCAR and that team just kind of wanted the female view and the sponsors and the fans that she brought to the sport?
To me, I'd have to say I'm on the fence about it. I'd have to say everything that you covered, a little bit of everything is true.
Okay.
NASCAR, they couldn't get that point across with Danica.
Right.
But Danica came straight over from IndyCar straight to the Cup Series.
Well, she had a part-time Xfinity.
So, but she didn't get enough run time in any of those cars as far as that back then, because when she came to the Cup Series, they were still driving COT cars, weren't they?
When she came to Cup, I do believe she joined the COT era, the very last bit of it, from what I remember.
So, I mean, you don't blame her there, but then again, I don't believe Stewart-Haas put a lot of money in her cars at all. When she was over there, I feel like she was just one of those, there wasn't a talent that they felt like could fill the 10 car, and NASCAR had this agenda at that point.
Right.
So they were like, okay, well, we'll just stick her in here, and, if she wins, great. If not, well, we really don't fucking care.
Yeah, and I think it was another one of those publicity things with Danica. She obviously was a very gifted IndyCar racer, and we knew and respected why she left IndyCar. That's a dangerous sport, running an open cockpit at 200 plus miles an hour. So I don't fault her for leaving that sport when she did after Dan Weldon passed away.
Yeah.
Moment of silence for Dan there. But as far as a talent aspect, I don't know. And I don't think it's a male-female thing. I strictly believe it's just a talent thing where some of the people they bring in to fill these seats just aren't as good as some of the guys we're used to watching every week. So,
and I believe some guys, and this is my belief, and it might sound, a lot of people think it's a conspiracy theory through NASCAR. I don't see how it's conspiracy, but to me, there's some people that don't run too well in one manufacturer's ride, but as soon as they switch manufacturers, it doesn't matter team. Boom, right out of the gate, we're running top tens, running wins. I mean, for let's see, who's good at Joey Logano, good example. Joe Gibbs Racing.
okay.
Did okay over there, and then made the jump over to Penske and didn't do much over at JGR. But as soon as he hit Penske, man, Logano was the next best thing. Rattling off wins. Look, I mean, it took him a while. He's got 2 championships. Logano's, every week when we turn on the TV, we expect Logano to be one of those ones up front fighting for the race win. Not necessarily saying Kyle Busch because he had that slump with Toyota right there at the end before JGR let him go.
Right.
But Tyler Reddick being another perfect example, didn't do shit with Chevrolet. I mean, he rattled off 2 wins, one at Road America and the other one being at Indy.
Right.
But that was it. And then he heads over to 2311, and now he's running up front, constant top 10 car,
right.
winning races. That's just what I believe. I believe some people are in, they drive and do better in one manufacturer rather than the other.
It's a interesting thing when you look at all aspects of it. Is it a manufacturer thing or is it a personnel thing? Do you take a driver that might not be getting along with one team and some of their ideas and their methods and their way of handling operations, and then it's no different than a basketball player switching teams within
a perfect example would be Sheldon Creed and RCR last year, the incident at Martinsville.
Right. I mean,
perfect example.
It felt toxic to him, so whatever happened behind closed doors with RCR and Sheldon Creed, I don't wish that upon any driver because Sheldon looked visibly agitated with the entire situation by the end of his stint in that 2 car. And now he looks like he has the weight lifted off his shoulders. He looks like he's enjoying racing again. He hasn't won in that 18 car yet, but don't count him out.
Sheldon's a wheel man, and he's an equipment that we know can go out there and get it done. It's just a matter of time.
Right, exactly. And he's got the equipment to do it. So it's got to be a culture thing. It's got to be an organization thing too, just as much, if not more, a manufacturer thing. Whenever you switch jobs and you get this like rejuvenation, you get this little pep in your step, and you take that positive mindset into a brand new organization with Toyota and Sheldon Creed, you never know, the sky's the limit, man.
I think the same example applies to Brandon Jones. He had a good stint over at Toyota with Joe Gibbs Racing.
Right.
Won a couple races. I know. I think what kind of actually sealed the deal for him going to Junior Motorsports was the whole Ty Gibbs incident at Martinsville.
That was absolutely devastating. I don't know if some of y'all watched the post race on that, but his girlfriend approached him and held him for a moment, because I still don't think anybody could believe that his teammate could do that. Like, to punt your teammate out of the way for an unnecessary win that you didn't need when he needed it most was absolutely mind-blowing to me. I don't blame Brandon one bit for mentally being checked out from that point on, because and especially it being the grandson of the team owner, like, that is just brutal.
Well, I mean, and he already has a lot of people because he's got a cup ride at this point.
Right.
He's running Kurt Busch's ride, I believe, at this point.
Right.
These cup guys, you think you can go down to Xfinity, and those guys will only put up with it so much.
Right.
I mean, look at it's not the only incident that Ty Gibbs had at Martinsville.
Nope.
Look at the fight he got into with Sam Mayer.
Yep.
But he put the bumper to Sam, and he was just beating and banging and driving in the corners and using people for, brakes.
Right.
Sam got tired of it and went wide, and all that incident right there coming to the checkered.
Right.
That's where Ty Gibbs has got talent, but the kid has got to learn that you can't do that crap.
Can we agree that Ty has had a much better season as far as staying out of trouble and staying out of people's way? It seemed like something may have clicked there with Ty, and I'm not for Ty, but I'm not rooting for him to fail, right? So I think it's fair to say that Ty has really done a good job of staying on everybody's good side this season and not being in the media for the wrong reasons. Rather, he's finishing races, and we all know he's probably going to win a couple here coming up here very soon.
Yeah, because last season, man, the media was eating him up with nothing but negativity, especially with all the on-track stuff, him turning people, him wrecking people, the incident that he had on pit road at Texas last year.
Yep.
That you can't do that stuff. And Ty honestly reminds me of a young Kyle Busch. The kid has got exponential talent. Like, there's no reason he shouldn't be behind the wheel of a Cup car.
Correct.
And it pains me to say that because I don't care for the kid.
Right.
But I will give credit where credit's due and give kudos. This kid's got talent. He's got the equipment. I will agree with you. This season, he's grown up.
Yep.
He's stayed out of the media for the wrong reasons. Really haven't had any altercations with him and any other drivers, on track or off track. And he's had speed and almost won several races. So, I feel like Ty's probably keeping to himself. Dotting all his I's, crossing all his T's, and making sure that he's in his lane. And I know that he catches a lot of heat because a lot of people believe that the reason why Kyle Busch lost his ride at Joe Gibbs Racing was to make a spot for Ty Gibbs.
Listen, if people can point fingers all they want. They can say Ty Gibbs stole Kyle Busch ride. But if Kyle Busch wanted a Joe Gibbs ride, Kyle Busch would have a Joe Gibbs ride. Let's just call it what it is. You're talking about the guy brought 2 championships to Joe in the last 6 seasons. Kyle Busch looked like he was mentally ready to move on. It didn't really seem like, I know people want to jump on that story, but I don't feel like it was taken from Kyle as much as Kyle looked like he was just ready to move on to another chapter of his life.
I know the season before, when they made the switch, the crew chief from Adam Stevens to Ben Bayshore, that they had a talk about wanting to change. Adam wanted to change Kyle went to Adam and said, hey, there needs to be a personnel change in the garage and on the team.
Right.
And Stevens said no. So that's why the separation for Adam Stevens and Kyle Busch, allowing Ben Bayshore to come into the picture.
Right.
And I believe at that point, Joe Gibbs Racing was like, okay, I think they sat Kyle down and they had a mutual agreement because at the end of the 2022 season, or beginning of 2022 season, Kyle said 3 or 4 races into the season that he was alerted. I don't know by whom, but he had been told by a Joe Gibbs Racing employee that the 18 car for him was not going to be an option in 2023. So he knew the end of February, beginning of March, sometime there, the 18 car, that he was going to be in a new ride following the next season.
Okay.
They just didn't let the fans and the media know that, I guess, for all the publicity.
It started leaking about halfway through the season, if I remember correctly. It was speculation that Kyle was no longer going to be a member of JGR Racing.
And then I believe it was December when Kyle finally announced that he would be driving for RCR.
Right.
But we just didn't know. We had no idea what sponsorships were going to be on the car up until like January. Right. So almost a month out, sponsorship deals, charters, all expensive to the sport right now. especially with the price of things. Do we see the sport changing at all in the coming years? I know we're getting a big change right now, especially with the talk of Texas being reconfigured, the repay for Sonoma, a bunch of this stuff that the newer fans get to see, but they didn't get to experience the good stuff before it started changing.
Right. I think it's all about perspective. I think the new fans will come into something that I feel is a pretty good product. Each weekend we have racing. If you're there in person and enjoying what the product actually is, I think they're doing a phenomenal job. And I think you have to change, especially in today's day and age where everybody's attention span is so short. I think you gotta keep up with that aspect of it too, because the average human these days gets bored very quickly, regardless of it being sports or movies, TV shows, whatever the case is. You got to keep people's attention, or else they're going to jump onto the next bright light. So NASCAR, it seems to be adjusting well to the new fan bases that are rolling in. I definitely expect more sponsors to jump in. It's going to be a lot of new sponsors that maybe some of us old school fans aren't used to. But we also have to be open-minded. We've got to be open to change. That's going to be the biggest thing with some of the old school NASCAR fans, and adjusting to the next gen car and the things moving forward. Is, are you as a person, as a fan, able to adapt to the changes that NASCAR are bringing? Because if you are, personally, like myself, I'm having an absolute blast covering the sport and watching the sport and seeing the drivers and all the personalities and all the new shiny sponsors that come in each week. It's been a ball for me. So if you're able to be open-minded, I think yeah, absolutely, yeah, NASCAR is going to keep changing and they're going to keep adapting, and I think if you want to be a fan, you're going to have to keep up. It's that simple.
And for all the fans out there that are afraid of change, or not necessarily afraid but don't like the change, coming from a person who, when they started first talking about the next gen car, they released pictures of just the carbon fiber body. There was nothing wrapped in it, and the car just looked awful.
Right.
And everybody, change is going to come whether you like it or not.
Correct.
The sport has to change with the times to keep up with the fan base.
Right.
They're bringing younger fans in. The old Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Gordon and Richard Petty fans, they're all not watching, or they're all died off.
Right.
They've got to do something new. So you guys that don't like change, whether you like it, change is going to happen.
Right.
So pick and choose what you like. Be picky. Just don't be the one that bitches about everything.
Right.
Enjoy what you enjoy. Have conversations about what you don't enjoy.
Right.
That's what makes NASCAR. I don't like this person. I don't like this about this car. I'm sure there's some drivers out there that'll probably agree with what half the shit you got to say.
Right.
I'm still not on board with the single lug nut. I think that's one of the most stupid things that NASCAR could have done.
And can I respond on that real quick?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Because the single lug was a big adjustment for a lot of teams and a lot of fans. I've seen it from both sides, and my open, honest opinion would be, we've seen loose wheels or loose lug nuts in the past. I really haven't seen an uptick in it. And maybe we can run the numbers on one of our future shows. But people used to have loose lug nuts and have to come back down pit road and lose a lap the same way these guys are losing the single lugs and having to come down and getting their penalized. Now, NASCAR has implemented penalties, like real post-race penalties for teams to be suspended because it's a safety issue. We don't need these tires coming off and getting punted into the stands or the fence or whatever the case may be. So I understand the suspensions. And if it happens, it's happened to Tyler. God, dude, I don't know how many times that dude has rolled out of a tire and it's cost him a race win potentially. So from being a fan that's directly affected by it, but it's NASCAR's rule. It's their rule.
There you go. It's changed. It's already been changed,
Correct.
And you've got to just mold to it.
Correct.
But see, coming from me with the whole tire thing, yes, it's a safety issue, but I feel like NASCAR or whoever, came up, hey, let's put the single lug nut. I think they came up with the safety issue, just to me, because I agree with you. You had loose tires with 5 lugs, but you still have loose tires with 1 lug. The only difference is if you got a loose tire with a 5 lug tire, big fucking whoop. What's it going to do? Wobble or break? Or break a tie rod or something like that. Tire's not coming off the car.
Right.
That's where the safety issue, I think, starts, is there's only that one piece that you get to rely on. If that one piece fails, there's no safe fails.
Okay.
That tire comes off. I believe NASCAR created that safety violation, but that's my opinion.
So then we got to ask ourselves, why would NASCAR go to a single lug knowing that it's going to make half the fan base question it? It's going to make a portion of the fan base hate it, just because they're afraid of change or whatever the case is. They're not the ability to adapt to change, I guess, unless NASCAR actually thought it was for the better, for the car, for the crews, for the teams. It doesn't seem like NASCAR would purposely make decisions to go backwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I completely understand that. NASCAR's making decisions to try and go forward.
Right.
Some of them, to me, I know the whole reason they went with the single lug is because they wanted to go with a wider tire,
Okay.
for better grip and things like that. With a wider tire, you have to have a bigger brake package and such. At that point, they couldn't create anything that would be able, like a 5 lug combination.
Right.
It was just too big. There was no choice but to go to a single lug.
Right.
And to me, I enjoy the racing. I'm a racing fan through and through. I have my discrepancies that I pick out about NASCAR, about teams, about the car in general. But I'm also a race fan who enjoys all the other aspects of it, because I'm like, I don't care for that, but that makes this aspect that I don't care for makes this aspect that I care for better.
Right.
So it's on the fence. It's a win-lose type situation. To me, honestly, because the rear toe links, I believe NASCAR needs to fix. They need another design, because just the slightest impact with the rear on the wall, and you're done for the day.
Right.
Broke toe link. To me, I think they should have kept the Gen 6 car,
Okay.
took the body of this next gen car and put it on top of it, and just used the aero and engine packages.
Okay.
And let them have at it, because then you would have had the strength and durability of the last car. You still have the strength and durability on the outside from this next gen body.
Right.
And then the aero package and speed package, or aero package and performance as far as horsepower goes. I believe it should have remained the same as what they have it now, and I believe the racing would have been phenomenal.
Right. I think it's an interesting thing with all the changes that the next gen car brought to the sport. I think NASCAR had a decision to make, and why a lot of the fan base might have been jumping ship in the teens was because the Xfinity cars and the Cup cars were so similar. I mean, all the way down to the tires, the lugs. They were looking so similar. It was basically like you were watching 2 Xfinity races, or if you want to go the other route, 2 Cup races.
Depending
I look at my diecast, and I have Xfinity diecast and I have Busch Series diecast, and they look identical to the Cup cars before next gen. So I think what NASCAR's attempt to do was to create a new identity for the Cup Series, because it actually was their top tier series, and they wanted the cars to look unique all the way down to little details like the nut.
It was their new pretty much their brand new shiny car that they wanted the neighbors to stare at.
Right, the new identity.
It brings in, everybody looks, and I know you go to the gas station or something, you see the old race car stickers still up on the coolers and all that stuff. Well, you see these new cars, and they do look good. The look of these cars, they're slick.
Right.
The Tyler Reddick cars, some of Bubba Wallace's cars, man. Especially the Columbia cars.
Yeah.
The paint schemes, the new chrome numbers that NASCAR's allowing. like you said, the new identity, it allows the people that wouldn't generally look in NASCAR's direction, and it's the OCD ooh shiny.
Right. Exactly.
It's like, ooh, what is that?
Right.
It's pretty much bass fishing. That's what NASCAR is doing, throwing shiny stuff out in the water and bringing all that bass in.
Right.
So,
And they had to switch to that method because the old method that kept fans around wasn't working anymore, because those old school fans weren't sticking around. They weren't showing up to races, so they had to make a change.
we'll see. And I believe NASCAR had to make a change because they screwed up in the beginning, anyways. The aero package that the Gen 6 car had, you know, with the taking the super speedway fender to every race of the season, where you weren't able to get, you had to use the throttle, keep in the throttle, and use the brake, especially at places like Pocono.
Right.
There was a lot of drivers who complained about the aero package. I believe if they would have gotten with the drivers and listened to the drivers, that we probably would have got a better racing product if they would have listened to the drivers and the fans and wouldn't have just come up with this aero and horsepower package on their own. What was it Kyle Larson was saying the other day? He still thinks these next gen cars need more horsepower.
Right.
He said, you know, we can turn the horsepower up and down on these things. He said, if we wanted to, he said, I could bring 1,000 horsepower race car to the racetrack next week.
Right.
But NASCAR just won't allow it. And I don't think it's a horsepower issue. I said, I think it's an aero package issue, but then again, I'm not the one driving the cars.
Right.
And it's coming from Kyle Larson, who is a Cup Series champion, drives for one of the top tier teams in NASCAR.
Right.
So I would assume that he would know what the hell he was talking about.
Correct. And I fail to believe that NASCAR didn't get perspective from drivers and that some of their opinions and thoughts didn't go into this build. I think it would be highly immature of NASCAR to not take any kind of consideration from especially the veterans of the sport and implement it into this new car. Now, how much they actually did listen and take into the new car, I don't know. But I would fail to believe that they didn't take any insight from these guys.
You know, and I know they tried these cars, especially the next gen. They're trying to make them more comfortable and add more safety features for the drivers. As far as comfortability goes, I know the drivers have said the last car rode a whole lot better than this car.
Right.
With that being said, you know, all the factors, especially going to a road course or even now on 1.5 miles where these guys are shifting and downshifting into the corners, like Texas. What was it? I think they had Ross on the video, and they said he downshifted from 5th to 4th going into 3rd. He was wide open, and then when he was accelerating coming out of 4, he shifted back into 5th to come down the back or the front stretch.
Right.
So at every track, it's not just, you know, the transaxles and the transmissions. If you're a top tier driver, if you're driving for Hendrick Motorsports or Penske or something like that, do you prefer the H pattern, or would you rather have that slap shift they've got in there now with the transaxle?
Listen, with that sequential gearbox that they have and the forward shifting, I think it's right up there with drag racing, where they just have the forward and the backwards motion on the lever. I think it's to each their own. I think some of the drivers have adapted and adjusted to it very well. And I think some guys are very, very comfortable and very happy with the H pattern. It could be, I guarantee if we went across the garage in the Cup Series and asked 38 drivers, we'd probably come back 1919. Like, that's just my thought on it. The way everybody is so 50-50 on everything these days. And so you're not going to make everybody happy. NASCAR made a decision. They're like, all right, we're switching to the sequential shifting now, and some of y'all might like it and some of y'all might not, but this is what it's going to be. And of course, like predicted, some of them don't like it, and I think some of them don't really have a problem with it.
You know, when they debuted the next gen car, after they told us, hey, this is going to have the sequential gearbox in it. I know I myself, I think I predicted a little more blown motors,
right,
than what we got, just because, and now through the off season when they were testing, every day they were testing. It was live on YouTube, and I had it up. Didn't care what I was doing. I was at work. It was on YouTube. The testing they did with these cars was extensive.
Right.
A lot of the testing was they did it, some at Bristol. Phoenix was a testing site. Let's see, New Hampshire was a testing site. I know they did a test at COTA for the next gen car.
They did a COTA test, and I believe at Indy Road Course too, when they still had that on the schedule.
Yes, they did. The racing has gotten so much better. But with every new product, you're going to have bugs. And I believe that's exactly what the next gen car had. I believe NASCAR should have waited, honestly, another year before they debuted this car.
Okay.
Just because one of the safety features. But then again, I can't blame that on NASCAR because they didn't have the concussion issue like that until Kurt Busch late in the season. We're already halfway through the season. We're at Pocono when he backs it into the wall.
Right.
So can't really blame that on NASCAR because the tests are telling NASCAR, okay, it's within these margins. The drivers are going to be safe, but tests and the simulators aren't always accurate. You have to have the real life stuff.
Right.
So there was a lot of quirks and a lot of problems with this next gen car. I still believe NASCAR needs to come to figure out a tire for this next gen car with a one of the inner walls.
Okay.
So, like the last car. So when the tire went flat, they still had something to roll on and they weren't stuck.
Right.
They still haven't seemed to fix that problem with the next gen car.
I think when they switched to the 18-inch rim, it took a lot of that leeway out to have that inner tube. So, yeah, finding a balance between whether they need to make the rim smaller by an inch or two and go back down to a 15-inch wheel like they used to be before they switched, just so that the drivers have that backup plan, because too many drivers are getting stranded either in the grass or on the asphalt because their tires are flat and they're high centered on the bottom plate of that car and the diffuser. So I think the only way the new tire gets an inner tube is if they take a couple inches off the actual wheel.
See, and I think they're at an 18-inch wheel now. If they take an inch, if they go down to a 17, they can go to a little bit of a bigger tire. They can put a small tube in there, right, still get the performance and everything out. I believe a 17-inch rim would be the perfect match.
It's definitely worth noting, whether NASCAR does anything with it or not. It'll be, that'll be on up to them and on them whether they want to keep seeing guys struggle. We saw the incident at Pocono last year where Joey Logano borderline got out of his car and beat the crap out of a safety guy because he was trying to get back to pit road and he's got all four of his tires down. So it's definitely a concern that I think needs to be addressed. What they can do about it outside of a wheel change is going to be the interesting thing with it for sure.
Yeah, because leaving these drivers stranded, I believe that ended Joey Logano's day, didn't it?
It might not have ended his day, but I definitely think he went a couple laps down just waiting for a hook back to the. Actually, I think he spun out in turn one, went a lap down waiting for the tow truck to get him on the hooks, and then instead of taking him backwards up the back straightaway to pit road, took him all the way around the track, long ways, and ended up going a second lap down. So ultimately ended his day, but I think he was able to continue.
Man, more problems for Joey Logano.
Right.
It's insane to see how this racing season's going, and I'm just excited for, the next however many races we got left until. So what? I
think we're at
20 we've got 18 races, I believe, left until the playoffs.
Right.
And we get a shake off in the playoffs this year. Darlington for the first year is not going to kick off the playoffs. If I'm not mistaken, it's either Atlanta or Watkins Glen.
I believe Atlanta kicks off the playoff schedule this year.
see.
September 1st, if I remember correctly.
September 8th. September 1st is Darlington. So
Okay.
Darlington Raceway, that is going to be the racetrack that determines the round of 16. Man, that race, the Southern 500 is going to be nuts.
Yeah, it's going to be bonkers, and I hope they don't put any compound down and let these guys go at it.
Darlington normally doesn't have any compound down.
Good. But that does have tire wear issues, so that'll be a great one to follow. I'm really looking forward to that one.
So, I mean, the way the playoffs are going to sit, we have a super speedway race to kick off the playoffs in Atlanta. We go to Watkins Glen for a road course and then to Bristol for a short track. So they just shuffle these drivers all the way around. They're not able to get comfortable because they're going from high banks of a super speedway down to the turns of Watkins Glen and then, to the shortness of Bristol.
And good. Let the drivers be uncomfortable because that's when we're going to see who stands out above the rest.
It's being unpredictable. Then the second round, man, we have another mile and a half. We have Kansas Speedway, then Talladega, then you have the Roval. Yeah, that's going to be, and then you have Las Vegas, which is normally in the beginning of the playoffs.
Yep.
You have Homestead, Martinsville, and Phoenix. Talking about the championship, mentioning Phoenix, I feel like we need to get the championship race away from Phoenix.
Absolutely. I think that's fair. And I think that's something NASCAR is already in the works of working out, because I think what they did was they signed through 2024 and then they'll be able to readjust and evaluate following the season and when they put out the schedule in the off season.
Because they're talking about putting it back in Miami.
Right. Put it back at Homestead. I think it created a much better product. Now, you do take into consideration the rain aspect. Miami gets those random rainstorms that can affect race weekend, and that's something that NASCAR always takes into consideration, because the most important thing is the fans. You don't want to be pushing fans off until Monday, Tuesday. One, it's not going to look as good on TV, and two, the product, you just want the stands to look full. So you take weather into consideration. I think that was one of the big changes as far as moving it to Phoenix, because they had a better forecast and idea of that being clear skies and clear conditions compared to Florida, where it's constantly raining.
See, and I think Phoenix, I haven't really much cared for a championship race at Phoenix since it started. I believe it's produced a mediocre race, to be completely honest. Now, last year's race had me on my toes, biting fingernails, man. I was hoping that, I'm so glad that Ryan Blaney was able to bring that championship home. Ryan's such a deserving driver, and had the best car at the end of the day. But Phoenix just doesn't have the environment to be listed as a championship racetrack.
Right.
Going back to Miami, I'm cool with that. I believe they either need – I think the championship race and the All-Star race need to be moved every year.
Every year. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think adjusting the championship race, giving the demographic, you want to talk about fans and getting fans experience out of the race. Move the championship around. Let different parts of the country experience that excitement of a championship race, and possibly their favorite driver coming to their hometown and winning a NASCAR championship. To stick it in Phoenix every year, or Miami every year, I think that's a not a progressive move, and I think it can deter some people from really, giving a shit.
I mean, and to me, like, I believe if we were to move our All-Star race around, I think our All-Star race, don't worry about the clash. I think our All-Star race needs to be our grassroots race every year. I believe it needs to be a short track. Hands down, I'm glad North Wilkesboro is back on the schedule, even if it is for All-Star race. I know they're talking about putting a points paying race there next year. The racing was great. We'll see it on a repave this year.
Right.
And see what kind of product we get. As far as the testing goes for North Wilkesboro, the drivers that did test said that it was 2 seconds faster than what they ran at the race last year.
Yep.
And that there was multiple lanes. Like, you could run multiple lanes at Wilkesboro instead of just having to run all the way around the bottom.
Right.
and just the short tracks in general, an all-star race at Bowman Gray Stadium. An all-star race back at Bristol.
Absolutely.
The year that COVID hit, when they said, okay, we're going to put the all-star race on, as soon as they announced it was going to be Bristol and tickets went on sale, I had to get them.
Yeah.
Never been to an all-star race. And being that was the race that NASCAR really started, I think, the idea with the look at the next gen car, because they moved the numbers back.
Right.
They added that little flare with the under lights on the cars.
Right.
How
did that look in person? Because I think it looked cool on TV. I thought it was different. I'm a product. I am a fan of trying new things. Whether it works out or not is to be determined. But I'm not afraid of.
Yeah, you're not gonna know unless you try.
Right.
To be honest, I thought it looked sick. Kurt Busch's monster car.
Yeah.
And in that matte black with the green and the underlighting. Oh my God. It was just, that car was so sick. Chase Elliott's, the way that his lighting was and that teal on that Universe car.
Yep.
I think the All-Star, I think the lighting under the cars for just the All-Star race should be a thing.
Absolutely.
Just the All-Star race.
Better. They can make adjustments, because I think they had it just on the back end of the car. And if I remember correctly, they just did the colors of the manufacturers, right?
Yeah, so different manufacturers had different colors, different color lights.
You can add LED colors and change them to whatever shade of color you want. Let those boys color match those paint schemes, man.
I don't think it should be a light on just the back right now. I think it should be an underlight underneath the cars.
Right.
Just LED strips, but some of these cars, like when they came to Nashville, when they did the burnouts on Broadway, Kurt Busch had all that green underlighting in the wheel wells and under the car. It just made that monster car look so good.
Right.
And somebody like, or something like the Money Lion car, the nice looking color chrome Money Lion car.
Yep.
With the teal light underneath it, under the lights of North Wilkesboro or something like that. Man,
big fan.
Yes, NASCAR needs to expand there.
Right.
And I think there could be a lot more done with the All-Star race. But with the time, I know we've gone over just a little bit.
We went over a little bit this time, didn't we?
We did. There's a lot to cover, and we got into conversation, but it's all right. But until, what's our next one? Friday?
We've got Friday show. Yes, sir.
Friday. All right, guys. Well, this is Motor Racing Podcast. I hope you guys have had a good listen. Don, it's been good talking racing, bud. I know we got a little off track and a little lost to time, but it's always fun.
Hey, listen, that makes for some of the best conversations, man.
Yes, sir. So for all you viewers, thanks for listening, and we'll see you Friday.
Y'all be safe, guys.